welcome to Dotting the I in Spaceship. I'm Bob and this is episode 2. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to say that after reviewing the first episode, there are many parts that I hope to improve. The first episode was the first podcast that I've ever recorded, and although the new mic that I bought is okay quality, I can certainly use it better, speak clearer, as well as speak with more confidence. After editing the last episode, it felt like I was constantly asking a question that had no answer. So, my official apologies for episode 1, but this is always going to be a work in progress, so I'm certain that I will make a bunch of new mistakes with this episode. Alright, let's get into it. With 2 weeks of the Monday to Thursday written content under my belt, I have learned a few things. Chiefly that if I'm going to write 50 to 100,000 words of flash fiction this year, that it will be more entertaining and enjoyable for me to set challenges for them. Not that writing that many stories won't be a challenge in and of itself, but hey, if you're going to do a bunch of work for free, you might as well make it really hard. So from now on, I will issue the challenge of the next week in the podcast, which will be for the upcoming Tuesday content so that people following the podcast can access it. For now, while the podcast is building, I'll pick random writing prompts or challenges. But ultimately, it would be awesome if you want to send me prompts and challenges and I can pick the best. This actually pairs well with my Patreon reward tiers, as the $3 reward is to send me a prompt that I have to write. So it would be awesome if you want to suggest challenges that you can email me. And if you want to force me to do your challenge, then jump onto Patreon. While in the realm of Patreon, I've just added some ambitious and presumptuous goals to highlight extra work that I'll do if we reach certain levels. Have a look and let me know what you think. Moving on to the topic of the day. Since last week's topic was a bit more ambiguous, I wanted to really dig into a sci-fi topic. So this week I'm talking about sci-fi as a genre or a setting. In a lot of cases, we see stories where sci-fi is the setting and not the genre of the story. Sci-fi as a genre relies on the question of what if. It is a subset of speculative fiction that deals with technology and progress. What if aliens are real? What if we could travel through time? What if we had the power over life and death? I just described The War of the Worlds, A Christmas Carol, and Frankenstein, stories all considered to be masterworks of the genre. The sci-fi genre is further split into two categories, hard and soft sci-fi, where hard sci-fi may create non-existent technologies, but they must be extrapolated from existing technology or knowledge, and the story conforms to known scientific laws. Soft sci-fi doesn't conform to known scientific laws necessarily, and can have technology where the rules must be consistent. So for instance, you can break the light barrier so long as you can always break the light barrier the same way. You know, it takes 10 minutes to travel from one planet to the next, and it always takes that time. So long as the story is consistent, soft sci-fi doesn't care. Outside of genre sci-fi, there is also setting sci-fi. Setting sci-fi is a story that is set in a technological or progressive place, but it has little or nothing to do with the actual story. For instance, The Martian by Andy Weir is an action-adventure labyrinth plot with several hard sci-fi subplots. Watney's goal is to escape the maze of Mars and get home. In order to do that, he needs to contact NASA, grow crops, refit the rover. All of these subplots are necessary to the story, but they are essentially getting the tools, a part of the hero's journey. In the original Thesis in the Minotaur labyrinth plot, it is the equivalent of getting the ball of string, the magical armor, or the mystical sword. While The Martian is a good example of a story told using a sci-fi setting, there are stories that use a sci-fi setting that have no grounding in it. These stories are from other genres, but they do not allow the setting to influence the story. They could just as easily be set anywhere. Ungrounded sci-fi stories are the worst, and tend to be the fan-fiction-esque stories about courting green-skinned alien girls. Whether hard or soft sci-fi, I think both have a place in storytelling. Typically, sci-fi is about one of two things: hopeful optimism or terrifying horror. Hope that the future will be better than today makes for a lovely story. It is the heart of sci-fi stories like Star Trek. Horror sci-fi goes right back to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is the fear of technology outpacing us as humans. Whether hope or horror, sci-fi is rooted in telling human stories. We can be hopeful, which lift us out of our dreary day-to-day lives, or fearful, which compel us to be vigilant against the tragedies of the past and not to repeat them in the future. That's part of the reason why I love sci-fi. My dreary rural past hangs in me like a bad smell. Exactly the kind of bad smell that you might get if you spent your early childhood living in a dreary rural past. I spent my younger years digging garden beds and rearing sheep, chooks, worms, goats, pigs, geese, ducks, dogs, and whatever else Dad decided to pick up. I wanted to leave digging garden beds and rearing animals long behind for a more intellectually stimulating environment. It's not like I hated it. I still love going out to my brother's place and spending the day working myself to utter exhaustion, though I would much rather spend the time on the river with a rod in the water. But mostly I wanted out of the rural area because I was bored. It was a slow life and we only had dial-up internet. Exactly the kind of hell that a nerd like me would want to escape. I found myself escaping into books to explore a hopeful future or an apocalypse brought on by human failings was as far from cleaning pig pens as can be, and it seemed pretty good to me. It's part of the reason why I wanted to become a writer, because the ability to pick up a book and to escape from how you smell, I guess, for an hour, or in my case, days sometimes, was magical. The experience is something that I wanted to share with other people, and I wanted to be the one to write those stories that transported future generations away and off into the stars. Well, that's it for this episode. The prompt for next Tuesday's flash fiction piece will be Scars of the Past. You can check that out on Tuesday on my website, which is robert-lynch.com. There you can also find blogs, reviews and flash fiction, and you can check out my Patreon for more flash fiction and other rewards. I'll see you next week.